Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Councilmember Bracco. If you'd please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, you can be seated. We don't have an invocation tonight. On to item 1.4, City Clerk's report on posting the agenda, followed by roll call.
Yes, Madam Mayor. The agenda was posted on Thursday, July 6th at 5:28 p.m. Councilmember Armendariz? Here. Councilmember Bracco?
Here.
Councilmember Klein?
Here.
Councilmember Hilton?
Here.
Councilmember Marks?
Here.
Councilmember Tovar?
Here.
And Mayor Blankley?
Here. All right, under orders of the day, we have none. And 1.7 is employee introductions. We have two. Jimmy's going to start introducing a management analyst.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. It's my pleasure to welcome Cheryl Ellenberg to the City of Gilroy as a management analyst, and her area will be our grants management. This is a position that Council added quite some time ago, and we were fortunate to fill. I keep saying Sharon because I'm looking at Sharon and there's Cheryl. Sorry. Cheryl has two bachelor's degrees and a master's degree in public health. She has spent about 25 years in the public sector in New York and California, and her most recent employment is as a teacher with the Gilroy Unified School District. She has three children, Brandon, Dylan, and Austin, and a husband, Stephen. See, I can get their names right. It's yours, the one I'm struggling with. And the children and them have lived here for 18 years, so they're all raised in Gilroy. So Cheryl is a welcome addition to our team. She will be the money hunter, and I know she'll be very successful. So please welcome Cheryl to the City of Gilroy.
Thank you to the Council. Thank you, Mr. Forbes. I believe that most of the Council members know me in one capacity or another already in different roles that I've played in Gilroy, and it really is a wonderful opportunity, so thank you very much.
Thank you. We forgot to mention you're a dog mom, too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Police Chief Espinoza has someone from PD to introduce, correct?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of council, and members of the community, very happy to introduce our newest addition to our team, Officer Don Tong. Today's his actual first day, and he comes to us with 7 years' experience with the City of Hollister. At the Hollister Police Department, he was a detective working major narcotics and gang crimes, and he was also a field training officer, a range master, a canine handler, and just recently promoted to the rank of corporal. During his tenure as a police officer, he has obtained his bachelor's degree in criminal justice management. And in his spare time, Don loves spending time with his family. He lives here locally in Gilroy and traveling. He has two young children, ages 5 and 3. And as you can imagine, keeps him very busy. And he's also very passionate about the outdoors and enjoys fishing and hunting in his spare time. Please help me welcome Officer Don Tong.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I appreciate the opportunity, and I can't wait to use my experiences to serve the City of Gilroy. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Okay, with that, we move on to ceremonial items. We have two, and I'm going to go to the podium. I'm going to start with the retirement proclamation for Donnie DeLorenzo. So, Don, can you meet me at the podium there? A little past you as I get it. Maybe I can do without glasses. We'll see. Okay. Whereas Don DeLorenzo has been the general manager of the Gilroy Golf Course since 1985, serving golfers and the community for these past 38 years. And whereas Don started playing golf at the age of 9, learning to play at the links of the Gilroy Golf Course, taught by Vern Brown, the course pro at that time. And whereas Don grew up in Gilroy, graduating from Gilroy High School in '76 and from San Jose State in '81, Don competed on the golf team in both high school as well as on the university's team, becoming a key player on the nationally ranked Spartans team. And whereas Don and his wife Mia wed on October 20th, 1984, and raised their 3 children, Dan, Bria, and Vinny, in Gilroy. And whereas at the age of 27, Don started as the general manager for the Gilroy Golf Course in 1985, and later also took over the Gavilan College Golf Course in December of 2010. And whereas Don was recognized as the 2014 Man of the Year by the Gilroy Chamber of Commerce, and whereas Don has been an active and proud resident of the city of Gilroy and invested heavily in the youth of our community throughout his career, including supporting the First Tee Silicon Valley organization as a board ambassador. Now, therefore, I, Marie Blankley, who took golf lessons from this guy too, by the way, Mayor of the City of Gilroy, together with my colleagues on the City Council, do hereby thank Don DiLorenzo for his many years of service to our local community and to the sport of golf, and congratulate him on his retirement. Sir, present this to you. Would you like to say anything?
I'll just say a couple words.
Absolutely.
Mayor and Council, thank you very much. I think, first off, I just want to thank the City of Gilroy, the administration, the staff for all the years. I've obviously had a lot of connection with a lot of staff members, starting back with the City Administrator Jay Baxa and Parks and Recreation Director Bill Ayer, who we got started with. But I hit my first golf ball out at Gilroy Golf Course in the summer of 1966, Mr. Brown, and it's been a love affair ever since. It's been my honor, my privilege to be able to, and with your help, have affordable, accessible golf in Gilroy. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing this if I didn't have the right people to take over Gilroy Golf Course, Inc. The Torres there, John and Nancy, I want them to stand up. They are, you guys are very, very lucky. When you talk about rooted in Gilroy, you could almost just change this name, and a lot of that goes right there. So we're not going to skip a beat. And I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank my family. Through the years, missed a couple Little League games and a couple birthday parties, But once again, thank you very much. And I'm not going anyplace, so looking forward to seeing everybody. Alrighty.
Okay, John Ballard, do you want to come on up? This is a retirement proclamation for one of our PD employees. All right, I'm going to read this and do the same. Okay, this one I might need my glasses though, the smaller print. Whereas John Ballard served the city of Gilroy for over 16 years, and whereas John began his law enforcement career with the Gilroy Police Department in December of 2006, he has held numerous collateral duty assignments over his career to include HNT, sexual assault, child abuse detective, MAIT investigator, crime scene investigator, FTO/coordinator, digital forensic examiner, and the designated infection control officer during the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas John promoted to corporal in 2015, to sergeant in 2016, and then to administrative sergeant in 2019, where he assisted with the recruitment and hiring of department personnel. And whereas John is retiring from the position of police sergeant and has left his legacy as one of public service, teamwork, compassion, and dedication, and whereas on June 15th, 2023, Sergeant John Ballard retired from the Gilroy Police Department with a sincere gratitude and appreciation of the Gilroy City Council for his years of dedicated public service to our fine city. Now, therefore, I, Marie Blankley, Mayor of the City of Gilroy, and on behalf of the City Council, the citizens, and employees of Gilroy, join in thanking John Ballard for his commitment of service and wish him well in retirement for years to come. Did you want a picture? Okay.
I'll make this, I only have 5 pages here for. I just want to thank the mayor, city council. This has been a great city to work for, a great department. Great community. I've done almost 27 years in law enforcement, and I'm going to steal something Wes Stanford said in May. He said the days can drag, but time flies. The years fly. So it's been great having Captain Smith as my boss for a big chunk of the career, and I think you guys have been a wonderful place to work, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for this.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we move on to item 3, which is presentations to the council on items not on the agenda. I've kind of stopped announcing ahead of time. If you want to speak on something on the agenda, please do fill out a card and hand it to our city clerk. Ty, do we have anyone who wants to speak on this?
I did not receive any speaker requests for this item.
Wonderful. Then we move on to reports of council members. Councilmember Bracco.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Armendariz.
No report.
Councilmember Marks.
I just wanted to say Gilroy Gardens had a very special 4th of July celebration with a picnic. They had a band. They had 4,000 people in attendance. And I also want to compliment the city of Gilroy for the fabulous 4th of July fireworks show. I felt it was the best that we've had in years. It was great. It was long. And you competed very nicely against all the illegals that were being shot up around town. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hilton.
June 30th, 2023, I witnessed history being made with our Assembly member Robert Rivas being sworn in as the 71st Speaker of the State Assembly. I want to wish him congrats. I also want to thank our County Supervisor Arenas, who delivered historic investments to District 1 programs and community-based organizations coming out of the county's recent budget adoption. She spoke about the great work that the South County Youth Task Force is doing and their latest bold strategic plan that has a focus on getting to the root causes of youth violence, gun violence, and providing positive pathways for our youth. She was able to get the South County Youth Task Force as a priority program for violence prevention and secure funding for an analyst position that will help achieve the goals by allowing the data to tell the story. Lastly, I'm proud to have worked with our State Senator John Laird on identifying the Gateway Senior Apartments Pedestrian Crossing Safety Improvements Project, and excited to announce the City of Gilroy will be receiving $350,000 as part of the recently adopted 2023-2024 state budget. This project will install a high-intensity activated crosswalk, high-visibility crosswalk improvements, and curb ramps to provide a safe pedestrian crossing of Monterey Road in front of the Gateway Senior Apartments, build off the recent successes of community-based programs that are a benefit to our residents. Year to date, I've worked with my office, has worked with state and federal legislators to secure $4.85 million for project funding that directly benefits our residents from the west side, east side, and now a senior housing project on the south side. Thank you.
Councilmember Klein.
Yeah, I have one report. It's Visit Gilroy. Wanted to give an update. They're finalizing its strategic plan right now. They'll be doing it in their next board meeting. Visit Gilroy paid to promote at the Wine Walk and Garlic City Car Show. The car show campaign garnered 10,496 clicks through Facebook, Instagram, and Google posts. Recognizing the power of art, Visit Gilroy also promotes the third Friday Art Walk and helped to secure the San Jose New Ballet performance on July 21st at the Neon Exchange. The Welcome Center has a new hire in Simran Kaur. Hope that's right, Frank. Ms. Kaur is a computer science major at Gavilan College, and she's a great asset to their team. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Tovar.
Thank you, Mayor. What I was going to say has already been said, so no report.
Oh, okay. On my report, the Caltrain survey is complete. I want everyone to know 1,472 responses were received, so thank you to everybody who took the time to fill out that. We will see what those results are in the coming weeks and see how that plays into new scheduling for Caltrain. City Administrator Forbes, in his report, is going to be talking about the sister city trip that we just took. I just want to say that we visited Angra, which is our sister city in the Azores, and it was during their annual festival. It was a wonderful time, a very nice reciprocation of a relationship and hospitality and that sort of thing. So these relationships are nice if you can keep them going, and it takes volunteers to do that. So former Mayor Al Pinheiro is the one really responsible for this one. And lastly, I want to point out two things. South County Youth Task Force has two events coming up. I sit on that together with Councilmember Tovar. And so I'd like everyone to mark their calendars for July 22nd is Party in the Park at San Ysidro Park from 5 to 8 p.m. And then also National Night Out, which is not strictly a South County Youth Task Force event, but it's a National Night Out. And it's going to be at City Hall right here outside in the grass, August 1st from 4:30 to 8 p.m. Okay. Council correspondence, we have none. Future council initiated items?
Yes, I have one.
Okay.
I would like to put on the agenda the reopening of the Wayland parking lot at Los Animas Park for the community.
Okay. Does that have support from the council to put on the agenda that item? I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a majority. Okay, that's all we need. Okay. Thank you. All right. Consent calendar. Is there anything that anyone wishes to remove from consent before I go to public comment? Okay. I'll go to public comment. Do we have anybody wishing to speak?
No speaker cards, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Then this doesn't have, we can take a digital vote on this. So would someone like to make a motion first?
Move for approval.
Okay.
Second.
All right. We have a motion by Councilmember Tovar and seconded by Councilmember Armendariz, and we can do digital voting.
Passed unanimously, Madam Mayor.
Okay, great, thank you. Under item 8, bids and proposals, we have none. So that brings us to 9.1, which is introduction and first reading of an ordinance adding Chapter 16B, sidewalk vending, to the Gilroy City Code. We're going to start with the staff report, I guess not from Sharon, but from John, Community Development. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Blankley, members of the City Council. John Biggs with your Community Development Department. We have for you this evening an ordinance that adds Chapter 16B to the city's municipal code, and this code would govern sidewalk vending in the city of Gilroy. Just some background information for the City Council. Back in April of this year, we had sort of a workshop with the City Council members and explained to you the recent state legislation that sort of took away the city's ability to regulate sidewalk vending and put in place rules that allowed sidewalk vending or made sidewalk vending not an illegal activity, but something that is permitted across the state of California. That was SB 946. We also talked a little bit about SB 972, which is really the set of state regulations that govern how the County of Santa Clara Health Department rules or can regulate sidewalk vending through their health department permits. We did get direction from the City Council to move forward and draft an ordinance that we are bringing before you this evening. And one of the things that the City Council also asked that we do is conduct a community workshop, and we held that workshop on June the 8th of this year, 6 o'clock in the evening at the Community Center over at the Senior Center here at the Civic Center Complex. That was a well-attended meeting. We had about 57 individuals that were present. A broad range of the community was in attendance, those that were interested in conducting sidewalk vending to those that had businesses or properties in various locations throughout the city and had questions about how sidewalk vending could be regulated. They also provided a lot of input along with the City Council that has worked its way into the ordinance that the City Council is considering this evening. SB 946 did limit the number of things that a city cannot do when it is regulating sidewalk vending. It cannot require that sidewalk vendors operate within a specific location within the city unless that location really addresses a health, safety, or welfare concern. And I think a lot of the rules that we have in place with the regulations in front of you this evening really are meant to address health, safety, and welfare issues and concerns as we have seen them and from what we've heard back from the community. You can't require a vendor to obtain permission to operate from a business, an entity, or a person. This is a permit system that is operated through the city. You can't prohibit sidewalk vendors from operating in public parks. They would be allowed to do so long as there isn't a concessionaire that has signed on the city to operate a food or vending operation within that given public park. You cannot restrict the number of sidewalk vendors, and I guess, again, this ties to you could if, and there's a big if there, if it relates to a specific or an objective health, safety, or welfare concern. Whoops, wrong button.
Sorry, Mayor. Can I ask a question before we move forward?
Would you, it's up to you.
Yeah.
Do you want to be
I'm
interrupted
comfortable
here?
answering
Okay,
questions
as
as
we
I go
go.
through.
Can you go back to that
Sure.
previous slide?
Yes.
So the very first one there, we cannot require vendors to operate in a specific area unless it's to protect the public safety, health or safety. So if we have vendors that are directly outside of a business, I'm trying to think of worst case scenario. For example, one of our establishments downtown where there's music, dancing, there's a lot of folks in there, and there's vendors right outside. Isn't that a fire hazard? Isn't that a public safety hazard? If something were to happen,
Well, it could be if they were blocking egress to the building or to the space, the commercial space that is owned by the operator of that business. But one of the things that this set of regulations that's in front of the council this evening is really intended to address public health, safety, and welfare concerns. So you see in the 2024 standards that we have in the code, there are a number of standards in there that are meant to address health, safety, and welfare issues. Things such as a sidewalk vendor cannot place their stand in front of an entrance or an egress point from a business or a building. So the ordinance in front of you this evening is really intended to put in place rules that address the health and safety concerns.
right, and I guess that's where I'm trying to go, because obviously I'm trying to think of the vendor's rights, but also the business owner's rights. So using that example where, you have hundreds of people in an establishment, and as you know, our sidewalks in downtown are very narrow. And then when you have a vendor that's literally on the sidewalk, and there might be 3 feet of space there, when does that become a hazard?
Well, I would say that something within 3 feet of a egress point or an entrance point would be a hazard. You'd want to maintain at least 48 inches or accessibility requirements. And that is one of the things for a stationary sidewalk vendor that we will be reviewing as part of the permit application process. They will need to give to us a site plan that shows, here's the building that I'm adjacent to. Here are the entrance and exit points into that building. We propose to put our stand in this location and maintain that distance away from those entrance and exit points so that we don't give a permit to someone that is going to create a standard.
Got it. So to answer my question, obviously, and I think you did, is if a business owner is concerned regarding that safety, if and when a vendor applies for a permit and they're looking to locate in front of that business, then there'll be some parameters for that individual, right?
Exactly. We will review those applications to make sure that they're complying with the rules, not only the ordinance, but other things that we feel are important to make sure that safety and welfare requirements are met.
Thank you.
Will there be?
Okay, just a sec. Hang
Sorry.
on. Do you have a question?
I do.
Okay, Councilmember Armendariz.
Thank you, Mayor. Will there be a requirement, I didn't see it in the language, and I don't know if it's permissible or not, asking for the exact specific location of where the vendor wants to apply to be posted?
Yes. We are, as part of the permitting process, we are going to be providing to applicants sort of a standardized site plan form so that they can begin to show us where they're proposing to put their stationary vending location, how far it is away from a street intersection, for example, how close it might be to a fire hydrant, the entrance to a building or a commercial space, a number of other things so that we can verify before we issue the permit that they're maintaining and in compliance with the rules that are part of the ordinance the council's considering.
And then a follow-up question. The county health permit requires those carts to have fire extinguishers on them, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
It does.
John, just before you leave the subject, since Councilmember Tovar was asking, I think what he was asking is addressed specifically in 16B.3A20. That's where you talk about blocking egresses and those. So all I would ask is that maybe that particular section should say 3 feet or whatever it doesn't actually list a distance, it just says shall not block. So it might make it more clear if in the ordinance it says that minimum amount. So we'll talk about that when we get to the things that we want staff to bring back or what changes we want, but that would be the place to put it, correct?
Yeah, we could certainly do that. And
Okay.
bring that back as part of the final.
Right,
ordinance.
exactly. Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Sure, you're welcome. So in your ordinance in front of the City Council this evening, there's a number of components to the ordinance. We have definitions that help clarify some of the terms that are used throughout the ordinance. We have the sidewalk bending standards, and I think this is a key element of the ordinance. There are 24 different standards, and these are the standards by which a sidewalk vendor needs to comply or demonstrate compliance with before we issue a sidewalk vending permit. And it'll be a set of standards that we will go out in case we get a complaint against a sidewalk vendor to make sure that they are in compliance with these standards. There's things in there, as we mentioned or talked about just a moment ago, such as separation distances from entrances and egress points to buildings. You cannot use a piece of city property as storage or display area, something like a city bench or a city sign. You can't use that as for display purposes of the merchandise that you're selling or the food that you're selling. You would not be able to keep an animal unless it is a service animal if you're a food service vendor. There's a number of other components that are really, again, all intended to promote and protect the city's health, safety, and welfare. Likewise, we also have regulations in there that are intended to maintain appropriate egress around or on the sidewalks so that those with accessibility issues have the path of travel that they need. Permit applicability, we want to make it clear that the permits applicable to a sidewalk vending include not just the sidewalk vending permit, but also a city business license. And then there's a provision in the codes as well that covers other permits that are required, such as the county health department permit, the state resale license, and any other permit that would be needed given either the food product or the merchandise that the vendor is going to be selling.
I have a question regarding that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Councilmember Armendariz?
So is that the same requirement, is that same order of requirements, is it the same for any other business or any other restaurant? You have to obtain the seller's permit, city business license, and county health permit before you're given, is that a requirement of brick and mortar?
that is typical requirement for a business hoping to establish itself in the city of Gilroy. We require our city permits like the business license and any other approvals that are necessary, along with if you're serving food or going to be selling prepared meals, getting that county health permit and sign off, along with the resale permit from the state, so that the city gets a chance to collect its income level as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The ordinance also covers sidewalk vending permit application and fees. The approval includes the conditions under which a permit could be denied, but also gives a applicant the ability to appeal the decision, and a process where that kind of links back to our vending regulations, which is an existing Chapter 16A. The sidewalk vending permits expire 1 year from the date of issuance. There are some automatic expirations that are called out in the code if the vendor, for example, lets their county health permit expire or doesn't get their business license appropriately. So those are other situations under which the permit could expire. The code also covers administrative citations. If someone is violating our sidewalk vending standards, they're subject to administrative citations, and the state has really taken away the city's ability to impose restrictions other than those administrative citations. They're not classified as misdemeanors. It's just an administrative citation, and the state has gone so far as to even limit the monetary amount for the violations. If it's a first violation and you have a sidewalk vending permit, for example, the fine is $100. On top of that, there are also some provisions in the code, and this again is coming through the state, that if someone doesn't have the ability to pay for those fines, they can request a reduction in the fees, and that's all embedded within the code.
Okay, Councilmember Tovar, do you have a question?
Yeah, and I might be jumping ahead here, but talking about...
If you are jumping ahead, can we wait?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Are you jumping ahead?
Let me ask the question.
Okay.
I guess I'm looking at sort of the, we talked about permits and the process and all that, right? Obviously, which I think you're touching on. And unless I didn't read it on here, I think one of the biggest issues or concerns that I've heard from vendors is sort of the process, how the process works and how difficult it can be, obviously. And we want to protect their rights, but we also want to make sure that they're doing everything legally, right?
Correct.
I just want to make sure that in here, because I didn't see it in here, but when we talk about processes, it has to be a process that's understandable, easy to read in English and Spanish. And I didn't read that in there, so I want to make sure that that's something that we incorporate in here.
It's not incorporated
Right.
in the code, and that was a conscious decision on our part. We felt that it was better to make sure that the process for the permitting process would be kept at the staff levels, so we could adjust and fine tune our process to address concerns or questions that we had in experiencing processing applications. But you bring up a good point in that we do want to make sure that not only the sidewalk vendors are successful in getting their permit, but the city is also successful in having these vendors as part of the community. And we feel strongly that the best way to do that is to make sure we have in place a process that is, one, understandable, is very transparent, and is easy to follow, and really makes it convenient for someone to go forward and get their appropriate permits and approvals in place so that they can leave City Hall in a short amount of time with a vending permit in hand.
Yeah.
And just one other comment, I think that the probably the biggest challenge that we're going to face from a staffing standpoint is making sure that other agencies are doing their best to get their permits in the hand of the applicants, because we'll need those before we actually issue our permit. So there'll be a lot of hand-holding that we're anticipating.
No, and I appreciate those comments because, again, in speaking with vendors, obviously they want to do the right thing, but there's the process. Sometimes it's confusing. I mean, it was confusing for me. So, I mean, again, so I just want to make sure that we incorporate that in there. And then part two of my question, so I'm not jumping the gun. I don't think I am. But part two is when we're looking at here, your report, one of the biggest issues that I'm hearing a lot from business owners is the parking, where the vendors are parking and taking up slots and stuff. And I don't know if that was addressed in here. But.
That's a good question. I should have made a clarification at the beginning of my presentation. This permitting process, this set of regulations, is strictly for vendors that are operating on sidewalks, on pathways, and parks. We have another set of regulations for vending permits. It's Chapter 16A of our code, and that is supposed to regulate people that are operating within our public parking lots or parking on a public, like in the downtown, parking in a parking space that's on street. Those are still subject to that list of requirements that is called for in the vending code.
Right. No, and I understand the differences there, but I think they kind of go hand in hand, right? Because the sidewalk vendors, they have to get their equipment there somehow. And what I'm hearing a lot from business owners, I haven't seen it personally, but I'm just hearing from what folks have told me is obviously they drop off their equipment, but they're leaving their cars parked there, and it's taking up 2-3 slots. And I think that's one of the concerns and frustrations that I'm hearing from business owners. So, and again, it's not something that's addressed in here. And I understand it's part of
It's a parking violation in itself. It doesn't have to do with this ordinance.
Right, and I think through the permitting process, we are going to do our best to explain to the vendors that we believe it's reasonable for someone to park in a space, unload to set up their stand, but then they need to move that vehicle so they're not occupying public parking spaces for a long period of time. Those should really be for the benefit of the customers, not only to them, but other businesses in the area.
Okay, thank you.
You have a question? Go ahead.
Thank you. Could you elaborate more on the language that says, the proposed ordinance also allows for the impoundment of vending materials in certain instances, including when they fail to comply with enforcement direction. So can you elaborate more on that?
Sure. That's the last bullet point on the slide here that I was going to go over. But we do have a provision in the code that does allow for the impoundment of vending displays and so forth if they're not following the direction of a police officer or code compliance officer. I really see that as a tool to compel enforcement. I think the goal of the city over the years has been to really encourage enforcement before it takes a step of moving towards impoundment, and there would be a lot of discussion between the person who's actually trying to impound something and city administration and probably our city attorney's office before we went to the step of impoundment. I think that's sort of the last
An
resort.
escalation, right?
Yeah.
Not a first step, not a second step, but an escalation.
It's escalation, correct. Good way to put that.
Okay. I wanted to say something on the previous point about the parking, and that is a parking issue. I just want to call to staff's attention, if you don't already know. That's something that's going to have to be considered. I know it can't be part of this ordinance, but what I have personally seen is people putting out cones of their own. There's no authority to do it, but they're trying to prevent people from parking in spaces that they are going to need to bring their vehicles in to unload. And so that, of course, that's not allowed. We know that. It doesn't have to be in this code. And somehow we're going to have to educate everyone that, that there's no authoritative if you see a cone, you can get out, move it, and park. I mean, that is not somebody's private space. But that is what happens with vendors who are trying to secure the space that they need to unload the stuff that they're bringing. So just something to be aware of.
I think that falls into the overall parking management of an area like our downtown.
Exactly. Exactly. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay.
Good point. Okay, moving on. Just wanted to highlight the permit requirements for the City Council that will be necessary to obtain a vending permit. As I mentioned, the city sidewalk vending permit itself. An applicant will need a city business license. There will be the requirement for the county health permit, state seller's permit, and then one item we didn't cover is that we will require liability insurance because they are going to be operating on city property. So we want to make sure that we have that liability insurance in place to protect the city in the long term.
John, on the subject of insurance, where does, if at all, things like OSHA and workers' comp come in? Does that have anything to do with the cities? Are we responsible for that?
No, I don't recall the name of the organization at the state level off the top of my head, but I looked at it earlier today, and there is a state organization that is responsible for making sure that a business owner is in compliance with workers' compensation rules and laws and unemployment laws and so forth.
So we don't have any liability there if a vendor doesn't have those things?
No, that would be a discussion between the vendor and the state.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, wrapping up our next steps, if the City Council chooses to introduce the ordinance in front of you this evening, we will come back to Council with a final draft of the ordinance at your meeting on the 7th of August, and that would be recommended for adoption. And if the Council adopts the ordinance in August, that becomes effective 30 days after that adoption. Then our intent, going back to Councilmember Tovar's earlier questions, our intent is to hold some community training workshops so that we are getting out there and explaining to those that are interested in getting a sidewalk vending permit the appropriate steps to take in order to submit the documents and forms needed to get that permit in hand. One final comment. We will be coming back to the City Council with an amendment to Chapter 16A, which is the vending regulations. We want to make sure we carve out appropriately sidewalk vending from our vending regulations. And like I said, we'll be coming back to Council with that ordinance for you to consider. And we'll also be coming back to City Council with a resolution for the fee that we will be charging for sidewalk vending. Don't have a specific number in mind at this point in time, but we will do a little bit more research and come back to Council with that resolution for the fee. Okay. That wraps up my presentation, and our recommendation to the Council this evening is that you introduce this ordinance, which provides permit requirements and standards for sidewalk vending. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, I see questions, but I want to ask on the fees. You were talking about the fees. Do we have any, are we, how do I want to phrase this? Can this council set a fee structure that's different for vendors who are residents of Gilroy versus vendors who are coming from outside of Gilroy and want the privilege of using Gilroy for their business? Can we set different fees for that when we get around to that, or can we not?
I believe we can, but I think the things council will need to be mindful of as we establish those fees is that the cost for a fee needs to be based on the cost of the city of
Cost
providing
recovery.
that service. So you would be probably charging that full measure to out-of-town applicants to reduce the local application fee.
Give a
little bit.
discount
You might
or something.
Be having to help supplement that
Okay.
amount a tiny bit. But that's a
That
good
would be
question,
how we
because that
do
was
it.
one of the recommendations or suggestions that came up during the community workshop.
Okay, but that would not be something to address here within this ordinance because the fee structure is coming somewhere else.
Correct.
Okay. So not something here.
And the city attorney's office would look into that because we don't want to get into any sort of disparate treatment.
Right. Okay, council, so questions now of the council.
People in the queue that have been waiting their turn.
I am so sorry. I'm not seeing it. So where are you in the queue? Go ahead. Councilmember Brock. Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hilton.
Last time we had talked about like a forward-facing, like public viewing, like permit, so that way maybe it has like inconspicuous information, like not all the business information, but something that any one of us or a member of the public could walk by, without trying to be like, hey, where's your permit? But to be able to see something so everyone feels comfortable, like that person has gone through a lot of work to get this here versus someone that doesn't. So that way we all know when to report and when not to report. And at the same time, if somebody sends us photos, that happens often, like Fred talks about, you could say, well, hey, go look in the right top-hand corner of their pop-up tent. Is this displayed there? Has that ever been thought of?
Yeah, that is, I should have brought that up. That was something that's part of the ordinance in front of the city council, that they're required to display their city vending permit along with their county health permit. And we believe strongly that will assist us in enforcement and assist the public in identifying those folks who have the permit and those that don't. So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I see it. Councilmember Bracco.
Okay. How wide are the city sidewalks?
They vary across the city. I think the narrowest one is probably 36 inches up to maybe 6 feet. I'm just kind of
What's
recalling.
the normal ones?
Nowadays, I think the city standard minimum sidewalk is 48 inches. I check with our public works director.
No, they're wider than that. I think they're about 12 foot wide, 14 foot wide.
No, I don't think they're
Sidewalks?
that
No.
wide. I think the minimum would be around 48 inches anymore.
Well, these vendors have 10 by 10 and 12 by 12 pop-ups on the sidewalk, and it's leaving a little bit of space to walk by.
Well, that would be one thing that we would evaluate in their permit application. If they came forward with a site plan that showed the sidewalk was, let's say, 10 feet wide, and they've got a 9-foot wide pop-up tent that they wanted to use, we would not grant that permit because it doesn't provide enough room for pedestrians or members of the public to get around. So that's one of the details that will come about as we are reviewing the permit applications.
Okay, and what you said about the insurance, I have a business, and the city of Gilroy requires me to have liability insurance and workman's comp.
And we would require the same liability insurance in the amount of $1 million per occurrence up to an aggregate of $2 million, and then $1 million of workman's comp insurance per occurrence.
Oh, thank you for asking that, because I thought you had answered earlier that workers' comp and OSHA were not with the city.
They're not with the city, but they do need to show that they have that workers' compensation insurance.
Oh.
It's still handled by the state regulations.
Did you say we can't recoup costs?
No, I said that the city can only recoup the costs that are involved in processing a permit or a regulatory document, and that would be the full amount that we would charge or could charge an out-of-town applicant. If we were to charge the local vendors less, then it might be something the city would have to subsidize a little bit.
And as part of this, how much space would be allowed to each vendor?
There really are no space standards. We believe that just based on firsthand experience and looking at some of the vendors that they could occupy as little as something that is 4 by 6 to something that could be 10 by 10. But again, the location where they want to operate is really going to dictate how big the space they want to occupy can be. There's a number of factors that'll come into play that we'll evaluate and make sure they comply with.
Because I've seen one guy, he's got like 3 canopies next to each other, and then he's taking 3 parking spaces on top of that.
Yeah, that would be an example of
have an
something
ordinance
that
yet.
probably would not get a permit.
Probably.
And if we enact this and we have a problem with the sidewalk constantly being blocked, because you can't really run a business on the sidewalk without blocking the whole sidewalk. If you drive downtown on Friday night, the sidewalks are blocked. You can't walk down the sidewalks. So if we experience trouble with this, then can we say, no, you can't be on Monterey Street? We'll set up these areas on 5th Street and Lewis or something, and that's where you got to be.
That's a good question, because one of the provisions we have in the ordinance in front of the City Council this evening allows us to come back and by resolution restrict the location of a sidewalk vendors if there are issues that we experience with vendors operating in a portion of the city. So I think as time goes on, we will, this is a broad set of rules right now that meant to address sidewalk vending as we see it happening in the city. But there could be instances as we move forward where we see some issues that we haven't thought of right now. We can come back to the City Council with a resolution that would allow you to put restrictions in place to, one, limit the number of vendors in a given area, or really restrict the area in which vendors can operate.
If there are health and safety concerns?
Yes, if there are health and safety concerns.
One more.
Correct.
Right now, we don't enforce much around in Gilroy. We don't enforce parking or anything. Or are we just wasting our time with this? Are we going to enforce it?
We are
Who's
going
going to
to
enforce it?
Well, it'll probably be a joint effort between the Code Compliance Division of the Community Development Department and our Police Department. Our offices in Community Development are open, Monday through Friday during normal business hours. And there may be times, that there's times at which the vendors are operating outside of those normal business hours. So we would look to the police department once we get a complaint about a vendor not operating with a permit or outside the requirements of the permit.
Most of the time, they don't have time to respond to the calls they're getting.
Well,
so this isn't going to be a top priority.
Well, I can't speak for the police department. What I can say is that the rules we're putting in place will be rules that we will be expecting vendors to follow, and the requirements that they get the permit plus display the permit acquisition on their carts or at their stands will help us with their enforcement efforts, because we will be able to identify, one, vendors that don't have a permit, and two, vendors that do have a permit if they're not operating in compliance with the standards of the permit or outside of the specific conditions applied to their permit itself. We will be able to have the name and number of that permit, and we can go and talk to them and compel compliance. We'll do our best.
Yes, we have to start with an ordinance and then hope that most will voluntarily comply. I mean, that's how we have to start, right? Okay, Council Member Marks is next.
Yes, these 2 questions are coming from a restaurant owner. Will generators be allowed? Because I didn't see generators mentioned in the ordinance.
They could possibly be allowed. They will have to be reviewed as part of the permit process. So we will want information on the type of generator that a vendor will be using, the noise level, the type of fuel that it'll be using, where the exhaust is being exhausted, and other information to make sure that that generator is operating in a safe and quiet manner.
Because this restaurant owner is very concerned about the noise affecting his restaurant, the odors coming from the generator coming into the restaurant. So I can see his concern. So maybe that person could be placed elsewhere away from a food building.
Yeah, let's
if
say,
possible.
for example, someone applied for a vending permit in front of a food market, and from the information they provided to us, it showed that the generator was placed in a location where it was exhausting towards the front door of that food market. We would require or condition their permit to relocate that generator or set it up in a fashion so that the exhaust was not creating a nuisance.
Right, barbecue smoke also was a concern.
There's no prohibitions against barbecues. It seems to be a component of the food vending operations and seems to be something that is widely used by vendors, not only barbecues, but outdoor grills and so forth that do generate those types of smoke and odors.
So the restaurants would just have to put up with any smoke that was going into their establishment?
Well, again, the benefit of having the permitting system, if we know that someone is generating issues for an existing business owner, we could take efforts to try and encourage them to move to a different location or come up with methods, maybe even a fan that would blow the smoke away from the restaurant or food establishment so that it doesn't create a situation or something that creates ill will.
I also noticed in the ordinance where people are going to be responsible for picking up their own trash, and they can't use city receptacles to put it in. So are they going, as part of the permitting process, are they going to be told to bring a trash can with them? And then I worry about the hot oil and grease, how they're going to transport that back to their vehicle to remove it.
We will require that they demonstrate how they're going to collect trash, either by a trash container system or some kind of a device that will hold bags open so their customers can deposit their trash appropriately. And grease and splatter is an issue, but that's why they have things such as splatter shields. And I know there are a number of devices meant to contain or hold grease and oils and fats and so forth so that they're not deposited in a way where they're spilling on the sidewalk or areas adjacent to the sidewalk. And if they do, the ordinance requires that they clean those areas up.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Councilmember Klein, do you mind if I just ask, because these are very specific to what she just asked, because I had them too. So on the generators that Councilmember Marks was asking about, that is addressed in 16.3A8. But what I would like to know is under what that says is vendors shall not use generators unless their vending permit explicitly allows for generator use. So under what conditions would you allow it? Because why would you need to have a generator for an outdoor vending establishment?
I've looked at some of the talk going around right now amongst vendors, and there are certain carts or vending devices that do have a refrigeration unit that is electrically powered. In order to get the electricity for that unit, a generator would be necessary. Or maybe they have some type of electric grill to prepare a certain food product. In those instances, we would say, yes, there's a clear link between the need for the generator and the activity that the vendor is conducting. And that's what we would be looking for, is that link.
So then with respect to that, the generators and the smoke, to another thing that Councilmember Marks mentioned, could we not put in this ordinance, because I'm thinking about outdoor dining. Here we are trying to promote outdoor dining. We have parklets. A lot of places want to do that because people seem to like it. We're going to be hopefully seeing more of that on the alley sides too when that gets done. Can we put into this ordinance that that things such as generators and things that produce smoke cannot be within certain distances of outdoor dining?
I believe we could, because I think that is a specific objective requirement or desire on the part of the city that we don't permit a activity like smoke and the generating noise and exhaust to impact the health, safety, and welfare.
Exactly.
So we could certainly plug that in.
Okay.
Look to the city attorney's office to see if she's agreeing with what I just said.
I'm just throwing out an idea.
But regarding that, the vendors themselves, the outdoor vendors, are generating outdoor dining themselves by selling food.
But it's
And
not
folks are
people
eating-
sitting there.
Right.
People are
but they're-
sitting and dining.
But they're still gathered dining, so.
It's
I
for the
mean, does
council to
that-
discuss. I was just throwing out that.
Right,
to
well,
me-
that's why I'm asking, so we
Right.
could discuss it, like, how is that going to work if we're asking them not to be around outdoor dining, but they themselves are
Around the
outdoor
the
dining?
restaurant, the stationary outdoor dining.
Stationary
not,
outdoor
Not the
dining.
sidewalk vending dining.
Well, I think in a restaurant, you're there for an hour to 2 hours visiting, whereas with the vendors, you might be staying there for 5-10 minutes, but they're not going to be staying there longer than.
Yeah, there's no seating with
15,
sidewalk
20 minutes.
vending. It's different.
I've seen
So-
it, but I also wonder,
Okay.
we have to be careful, again, like Jody said, with disparate treatment.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's, okay, I thank you for answering my question. That's what I was thinking how we would handle those two things. Okay, Councilmember Klein.
First, as far as in definitions, giving the sidewalk vendor means the person who sells food or merchandise from a vending device. We don't have anything to do with services, right? That's not part of this at all, as far as someone who's providing services. That wouldn't be part of any of this, correct?
That's correct.
So you're not going to be doing nails out there, or you're not going to be braiding hair or anything of that nature. It's strictly food or merchandise.
Correct. Food and merchandise is what these rules cover.
I have a number of items. I know I shared with Jimmy earlier, but would that be appropriate to go through this?
Whatever questions you want to get answered.
Okay. Well, again, in definitions, some things I looked at the Santa Cruz, because I know we use that as our guide, correct? In
A number
kind
of cities.
Yeah, a lot of it. There was stuff that was left out as far as like definitions that were left out. I'd like for temporary special permit is any permit issued by the city for the temporary use of or encroachment on the sidewalk other public area, including but not limited to an encroachment permit, a major public special event permit, or any other type of city-issued temporary event permit for purposes including but not limited to filming, parades, or outdoor concerts. And there was another one, enforcement official, means any person designated by the city administrator to enforce this chapter includes but is not limited to planning and community development department or parks and recreation department staff tasked with the code enforcement of compliance, all Gilroy Police Department sworn personnel and community service officers and or any city contracted code enforcement officer or specialist. And I was just curious why we left was a thought or not using those. And I just felt like those should be part of the definitions. It just brings more clarity in those two aspects.
We didn't think that they applied because we didn't believe that there was another specific section of the code that used those terms. But if the council as a whole would like to include them, we're comfortable with including them.
Okay. Also, going into 16B.3, sidewalk vending standards. Number 3, to maintain accessibility standards, sidewalk vendors shall not place or allow any obstruction to be placed on the sidewalk that would reduce the width of the sidewalk below a minimum of 48 inches, excluding curb. There's a part that I'd like to see added past this one, excluding the curb and excluding any sidewalk areas that are made non-passable due to any obstructions such as posts, parking meters, street trees, planters, or signs that are located on the sidewalk end.
We would be comfortable with that.
Okay. Number 4, again, it's talking about the vendor shall not use easy up tents or similar shade structures unless their sidewalk vending permit specifically authorizes such use. Use of these types of structures shall be requested in the sidewalk vending permit application. I'd like to see the following added. The size of a city-permitted shade structure or vending display device may vary depending on the location, but in no event may a sidewalk vendor's total operational size, including any shade structure or vending display device, exceed the total operational size allowed in the city's condition of use issued to the sidewalk vendor.
I'm okay with that. Again, to the council members to.
Right.
Could you restate
Okay.
that?
That's a lot to take in, man.
Yeah,
Just,
we'll
you know.
take it in.
I'll share it with you.
I don't even.
I'll share it with you.
It's okay, yeah, when we get to making like the motion, and then we'll put each of these things out
Okay.
there, I think that we want staff to come back with, is my personal opinion on how to do it. If anybody really does want that repeated right now, I'm sure Tom can do that too.
You can repeat it before we vote on it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a few other concerns, but I mean, I can, it's.
We haven't even heard from the public yet.
Right.
So, yeah. Right.
So, I mean, we can hear from the public and then come back. Whatever
Yeah,
you want to
if
do.
you're good, you're
I'm
good for now?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
good for now.
Okay.
Do you want me to clarify enforcement?
I don't.
This is enforced by 6A, our administrative citation section, so that includes the definition of enforcement officer. But we could tie that in, but the citations are issued under 6A. Yes.
That's correct. We use that. Chapter 16A is the process for enforcement or issuance of administrative citations.
Okay. Councilmember Armendariz.
My question was asked, thank you.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Tovar.
Thank you. And I have a few questions, but I think Councilmember Klein asked a very similar question regarding the ADA compliance, obviously, with the 4 feet. So I think that's something that will be addressed. But I want to go back to 16B.9 and under D. Says no person alleged to have violated the provisions hereby should be subject to arrest. Obviously, that's the last thing that we want, right? I mean, again, I've visited so many vendors, and I think they're hard workers and the food is delicious. But again, I'm just trying to find a common ground for all this. The question I have is in regards to, when we talk about citations, if a vendor is whatever violation, can they be asked to leave right then and there? Because in here it says they'll be subject to citation, they'll come back 30 days from now, whatever it may be. Can they be removed from the location if they violate?
I believe that's going to be somewhat dependent on the violation.
Right.
If, for example, they are not maintaining a separation distance,
Right.
I believe our code enforcement would first try and compel compliance by asking them to move their devices or their tent so that the appropriate distance is met. But on the other hand, if they don't have a valid health permit,
Right.
which is a larger health concern, I think that would be an appropriate time to say, let's close up the operation, shut down, don't come back until you have that valid health permit and the health department has signed off and said that the food that you're serving is safe for the public to consume.
Right. No, thank you for that. And here's my concern regarding it. I think Councilmember Brockholm sort of mentioned it as well, but in talking with the county, obviously, they say that they can't do anything unless the city takes action, right? If that's the case. Who is going to be who's going to process that if that comes about? I mean, if our police department's already, busy on other calls and there's somebody who's violating, who's going to be in charge of doing that?
Well, it will, I think, first fall to code compliance
Okay.
to make sure that, they would be our first point of contact. And it depends, again, a little bit on which department will be processing these permits. But as I mentioned earlier, it'll probably be a combined enforcement effort between the staffing of our code compliance office and our police department. There'll be coordination between the two departments, maybe even 3 departments, depending on what the issue is.
Right.
But we will, we're taking this seriously. We're getting a permit in place to govern these.
Right. Because what I'm trying to understand is, obviously, with the concerns from a lot of the businesses are the vendors late at night, obviously. City Hall's closed at that time, right? So, and our police department is extremely busy and thin. If that was the case, because the last thing that we want business owners to take it upon themselves, right? And I guess I'm trying to get a clear answer. If that's the case, who do they call to make sure that this is something that's dealt with? And then part B of my question is, can a business owner who, if there's a vendor in front of a business, can a business owner ask them to move?
No, the business owner cannot ask them to move because our state requirements, the state laws say that someone doesn't need permission from an entity or a person in order to operate. The permit issuance rests with the city. And in terms of violations, I mean, someone can call the police department and, if it's outside of normal business hours, and they would be the first first department in the city that could respond if they have the resources to respond. But outside of that, during normal business hours, they'd be contacting our department. And again, with the permitting system in hand, we would know who the people are that we've given a permit to, and we would reach out to them to see that they adjust and bring their vending operation into compliance.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, we went through everyone, and now everyone's names are on here again. So I'm just going to ask my questions because I have some too, and then I'm going to go through this again, and then I would like to break and let the public share their stuff before we continue our discussions. John, on item 7, B3A7, which has to do with signage, I'm wondering if there should be some more verbiage in there about, or why, if you intentionally didn't say anything about the size of a sign. That's what I'm asking. So it does say that signs must be affixed to or painted on the vending device, but it doesn't say anything about the size of the sign.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit not knowing really what type of vending devices people will set up.
Of course.
And it's going to be tied to, the size of the sign is going to be tied to the size of that vending device.
Okay, so maybe we could add wording, if the council wanted, would there be reason not to add wording that says the sign won't be larger than the vending device that it's attached to?
We could certainly do that, yeah. I mean,
that would make sense, right?
It makes sense.
It probably
kind of
would be
goes
smaller,
without
but
saying, but we could certainly add that language in there. I don't see an issue with that.
okay. And with respect to noise, because I know that, and not on the generator, but just on noise in general. And this is hugely hypothetical. I don't know that anybody would do this, but is there something in here or something in our noise ordinance that would prevent someone from being outside with a loudspeaker saying, come and get your hot dogs here, and it's something that people can hear for the entire block?
Yes, the code in front of the city council says that a vendor needs to comply with all of the city's rules and requirements. One of those sections of the city code are noise regulations, so they would be required to comply with our noise regulations. And something like an example you just shared would be outside, sounds like it would be outside of the noise regulations.
Okay, and if it's not, I'll make sure we get to that, because that is something we're looking at on the standing committee. I'm in charge of that one, the noise ordinance. I just wanted to make sure that that's something we're, we wouldn't want, nobody would want that, not even the other sidewalk vendors. So, okay.
Yeah, but there's a path here in the code that allows us to get there, and with other sections of the code.
Okay, Councilmember Hilton.
What section is it that says the display? I can't find it.
What's sign?
The number? Yeah.
Oh, the sign?
Display, to display the county public health one and then ours.
That's not what I was talking about. That's in.
I know you said it's in here, but is it? Quickly.
It is 16B.3, number 12.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And also too, I've worked with constituents before with county public health because they did not have their permit and they operate on the outside of city of Gilroy, so you don't necessarily have to have that. And it was dealt with without the city getting involved.
Okay, Councilmember Klein.
So I have a question. I know we talked about 48 inches, or whatever that distance is, right? I think it's 48.
I think that's
now,
correct.
what is that definition? 48 inches from the entryway as they exit? Entryway?
It would be maintaining a 48-inch clear path of travel.
Okay. Coming out of a building.
Coming out of the building.
Okay. Is there any, because downtown's unique in the sense of you have, especially on some sides where you have businesses right next to each other. And so that 48 inches could, in some sense, impede on the, just by the size of what's going on, could impede on the other business. I mean, do we take into consideration, I guess is the best way to say, distance, just not the 48 inches, but also with businesses as close as they are, and does that play into that too in terms of impacting public safety, those type of things, and egress and getting through areas.
This would not impact the existing buildings and businesses. This would only apply to the sidewalk vendors, making sure that.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
With them being out there, but if you have these businesses out there too. I know right now our capacity is, are we 30% capacity? But what's it going to be like when 70% of the buildings are occupied and doing businesses, to where you have more traffic coming out of the different businesses and they're close in proximity to each other. So it's just people being down there. I know we're not Santa Cruz in the sense of the amount of people that are there daily, and at times downtown it's quiet. But again, I think you got to look at least in my mind, looking at what it will be like down the road too, and considering those types of things with this.
I'm trying to
Maybe I'm not being specific enough.
Well, I'm trying to think of the best way to address your question. Again, it gets back to these are rules that apply to vending or vendors, and it doesn't apply to the ultimate success of the downtown and the bringing in of visitors and customers. That, I think, is really kind of a function of the public space and the width of the sidewalk and the relationship between the buildings and those public spaces. It's intended to provide ample room so that in a busy downtown environment there is sufficient room for customers, visitors to use the public sidewalk without blocking entrances or egresses from buildings.
I know Santa Cruz, they do demarcation for places for the vendors to be, right? In specific areas.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah, they've kind of limit where they can be by where they put them, and that's to help with the flow of traffic in those areas. That's kind of what I meant in that sense too. Is that something we could do, especially as we grow? And I'm just, throwing that out there.
There is that ability down the road, so long as that requirement addresses a specific health and safety concern or welfare concern. We could come back to City Council with a resolution that puts in place those types of requirements to, account for a downtown that is very successful and has a lot of visitors there, like you see in Santa Cruz or downtown Monterey.
And that's our goal, to get that.
Exactly. That should be the goal of every downtown is to have lots of foot traffic. The more, the better.
I'll back away. I'll get some more later. But let public comment come on.
Okay, we have one more. Councilmember Armendariz.
I don't know if I even remember my question now.
I can go to public.
I'll take Rebecca's question.
To recoup enforcement costs, does the state allow for premiums in certain areas, like a downtown premium for permits?
No, the state rules appear to be pretty clear. The limits that you see in the code in front of you are what they're going to allow us to fine people. I don't see any way around that for a downtown or any other area in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Tovar.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. All right. I want to go back to Councilmember Klein's question again. I'm trying to, as you know, in our downtown, we have some places, like some of the breweries, there's outdoor seating, right? And I think it's like Settle Down Brewery. They have that kind of the extended out a little bit, right? Like the little, when we look at, and when we're looking at the ADA, it says 48 inches, it's 4 feet, right? From what end to what end? Is it the door, or is it to where the seating is, to the sidewalk? Because the reason why I'm asking that, if I was a business owner, I said, well, if I put chairs and tables out there, then maybe that'll keep people from coming to my area because there has to be 48 inches. Do you follow what I'm saying? I'm trying to see how some sort of loop in that.
As I know, the businesses in the downtown that have permission to have seats on the outside have gone through a similar process where they have located that seating or those enclosed areas so that the path of accessibility is maintained, in kind of all directions. So it's not just one singular spot. It kind of flows along the front of the business and down the sidewalk. And we would expect the same thing from the vendor applications that we review. They need to maintain that accessibility, and if they're infringing on that accessibility for another business, then we wouldn't be saying yes to their permit application.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so I'd like to open the public hearing at 7:14 and ask for public comment.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have 3 speaker cards. First one is David Leal. Second is Mercedes Little, followed by Marmando Ricardes.
Okay, so if your name was called, could you please come up to the front and be ready to speak? And you should be able to see the timer. Everybody has 3 minutes.
Okay. Good evening. I just want to kind of obviously get into this downtown thing. And looking back there, it says incorporated in March of 1870. So we have a historic downtown that looks like crap. It's very embarrassing with all these stuff that's going on. So maybe the easiest thing to do is put the vendors in a specific area that we're not disturbing our historic downtown. There's a lot of people spending a lot of money in this town, and we want them to come downtown. We got $30 million Shark Tank coming in. We have 3 hotels. We have a $4,000 alley, or $4 million alley, $2 million parking lot. We have maybe $100 million coming to our town, actually, within the next couple of years, and that's what they're seeing. Very frustrating. As investors, building owners, entrepreneurs, we want to come down here. We want to invest, but we need the help of the city, the staff. I look at stuff that majority of people on the board here have stated in their intros to being a city council member. It's all about safety, cleanliness, and where's it at? We're working on it. We got the lights. The lights came up. Everyone's talking about it. I've invested a lot of money down here. People are saying, "Great job, Dave. Thank you." And it comes down to a respect thing, if you ask me, because our city needs to be respected. It's an historic downtown. There's so much value here. We have 60,000 people in this town, and you're lucky if you get 1% downtown. Lucky if you get 1% of Gilroy downtown. And why aren't they coming? Because it's dirty, it's not safe, and it's not inviting. The GBDA just started doing the downtown again with the music, and I've talked to people. They're excited about it. They want downtown to thrive. Young families and people in their 70s and 80s. They're excited. Let's work on this. I think you got enough support, good momentum. Let's figure out where the street vendors can go and be respected. Last week, I have a piece of property in downtown. Someone set up for the second time, full-on barbecue, picnic tables. At 9:30 at night, I go down there. I call Gilroy PD. Gilroy PD goes out there, asks the people to leave. The person responded and said, "No problem, I'll be out there in an hour and a half." Okay, that's a slap in the face to me. That's a slap in the face to the city and the police department. Because an hour and a half, the city is shut down. That's my property. I'm sure no one here or no one out here wants someone cooking tacos on their dirt and the liability I have. So, very frustrated. I want to work with the city. I love this city. There's a lot of people that are investing millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars maybe with these hotels. When these Sharks open, do you want people to come downtown or do you want people to go to your neighboring cities?
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
All right, next speaker.
Hi, everyone. Excuse my beach day look. My babies are with me, so we went swimming, so you'll have to excuse that. But I get where Dave's coming from. As a small business owner in downtown Gilroy, we're almost open. We're opening up an Overflow Tap House Bar and Grill right next to Settle Down. My husband and I, along with Christopher Sid, we're very excited to do this. And we're also excited that these regulations are being looked at by City Council. I think it's important to establish transparency in how all businesses operate in downtown. I think what that will do for the sidewalk vendors is provide them with a clear set of guidelines that they need to follow in order to operate legally. It's important that I think what the City Council can do is find a way to create a database so that if we do need to create a reporting system on We Self-Report, that we can upload pictures, we can upload information We also talked about the health permit today, and I think it's important that the carts actually display the health permits equal to what we do as small brick and mortar businesses. I have a placard. Within 30 days of me opening my business, the health department is notified. They send out somebody to check my stuff. And I'm either going to get a green, yellow, or red. And that needs to be displayed so that there's no question as a consumer, when I go up to this sidewalk vendor, I know that they're complying with health and safety. We also need to talk about the distance. We talked about 48 feet a lot. 48 inches rather. That 48 inches is important, not just for the brick and mortar business, but also for the sidewalk vendor. It needs to make sure that, we need to make sure that that guideline allows for space on all sides. So if a sidewalk vendor is going to have their cart or whatever in front of a business, that it's not just about the business's opening. Is the sidewalk still have space for a wheelchair to go by? People with strollers, small children. And the other thing, don't make the requirements for the businesses generic. Make them specific. They need to have a driver's license. They need to have proper identification, LLCs. They need to have all of the same requirements that we need as small business owners to get permitted. And that way we can also prevent illegal business actions. Illegal business operations in downtown that are going unchecked put my children at risk. I don't want my kids playing in front of the business right now. We already have a very thin police department. And child trafficking is real. If you guys haven't seen the movie that just came out in theaters right now, it's an important documentary. It's a true story. It's happening right now. And our youth in San Jose is like, I looked it up. San Jose is the third most trafficked city for child trafficking in the United States. And that's in our backyard. So my time's almost up. I appreciate you guys doing this. And if you could add those few things in and get back to us, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next speaker.
Good evening, Mayor, distinguished council members. My name is Armando Ricardes, and I am the director for a program called Mesa Redonda Roundtable. We have just finished a cohort of 8-week cohort with street food vendors in San Jose. The ex-mayor had given us some funds to train these food vendors how to become a viable business. I'm lucky to say, and I'm proud to say, that it was a pleasure working with them. They don't want a handout. These food vendors, they don't want a handout. They want an opportunity to become a viable business. Okay? We went through their formation, EINs, liability, the health department. We went through all the application, city tax certificates. They were proud to do it. We were lucky enough to find funds for them so they would not have to pay the fees. However, they were willing to. So it gives me great pleasure to come up here in front of you guys and let you guys know that working together with them, you will have some businesses who will generate business tax. They will generate sales tax. I personally do love going out to eating them, after most of my restaurants have closed in San Jose, So giving them the opportunity to make themselves a legitimate business is a great opportunity for the city to generate new business. I'd like to bring an example on point. This young man, his name's Joe. After every night, he would Fridays, Saturdays, he would go and sell tacos outside of the nightclubs. He gathered his money and bought himself a food truck. Last month, Mayor Matt Mayhem and us did the ribbon cutting at his brick and mortar. So these are people who want to become business owners, who want to contribute to the society. So let's not criminalize them or saying this. I think with dialogue, letting them know what to be respectful of their own business, cleaning up after themselves, and not to post right outside of another business is where it begins. So I look forward to coming to Gilroy. We have some funds from Congresswoman Zoe Lofton, and we were able to come over here and introduce our program that is turnkey ready for you guys, if you guys are willing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next speaker.
Gary Walton, followed by Ron Kirkish.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Actually, I applaud the city for finally taking some action on this. It's been long overdue. It's a problem that has continued to grow. also got a copy of Terrence Fugazi's letter and Dan Nelson's letter, and I wholeheartedly agree that the proposal is not ready to move forward. There's too many questions. We have to do this right. My immediate concerns are that, I think that the city has a tremendous amount of liability. ADA, I see it all the time. I've been sued by these attorneys in the past for on my properties. You're a lawsuit waiting to happen. The other thing, and I don't know if John talked to the fire department, but in large venues like Capos, where the entire front is tent, cart, there's up to 900 people probably in there. In an emergency, getting out of there, people are going to get hurt. Another lawsuit, more liability. So I think that the other thing that I've noticed is there's a distinction between a street vendor and an outdoor restaurant. Many of these vendors have tables and tablecloths and chairs. They're no longer a street vendor. That's an outdoor restaurant. And they're taking up more space for the tables and chairs, and people stay longer. It's not what the intent of street food is supposed to be. The biggest concern I have is I think the ordinance as written has too many subjective areas where things can be argued. Like development codes, they should be written objectively, where things can be, the standards are clearly understood so that they can be enforced. Being ambiguous is not fair to the street vendor or city employees who are trying to enforce them.
I'm sorry, what's happened to the clock? Okay. Okay.
I'll just wrap up. In my opinion, this does not have to be a lose-win or win-lose proposition. There are solutions to this, but I think it's going to take some more conversation. I wish that we were further ahead on this and that we could move on to adopt this, but I think that the way it's set up, there are no winners. And I think there is a way to do it, and I don't have time to get into the details of that. But I'd love to have a meeting with John and maybe the property owners and the business owners. I was at the meeting, with the community, but I think the property owners, we're the ones that are directly affected. The businesses are directly affected. The businesses' employees are affected directly. And I think that discussion has to be had with the fire department about egress out of these buildings in an emergency. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, community. I guess my question is, where's our priorities? Where do they lie? Do they lie with improving our downtown? Do they lie with the business owners that have invested, like our gentleman said, millions of dollars? Or are priorities mislocated or misabused? I think that we really need to look at what is good here for our city. Is this really good for what we want downtown? Is this kind of downtown that we want to create? I know there are some restrictions that we have, but what can we do to do the best that we can do to help the people who invested their money in our downtown, in their businesses, so they can bring people down here, invite people here, and they want to come eagerly. I'm kind of concerned that we don't really think in a priority way here. So I would encourage you to look at the thing from 1,000 feet or 5,000 feet. What do we want? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we still have someone else.
No speaker cards,
No
Madam
more?
Mayor.
Okay, then closing the public hearing at 7:28. And is there more council discussion as a result of anything we've heard, or are we ready to start going down? Okay. Councilmember Bracco and then Councilmember Tovar.
Thank you. Yes. One thing I didn't see mentioned is the vehicles that are parked on Monterey Street. I've heard complaints of grease being on people's vehicles, people leaning against their vehicles, sitting on their hoods. Can we address that?
That's
That's an interesting question, because from what you've relayed, it sounds like more of an issue with the customers and not the actual vendors
Well,
themselves.
no, they put their pop-ups right on the edge of the curb.
Okay.
So they're cooking right there, and there's cars parked there. So that's not a good situation.
And I'm kind of looking to the city attorney's office real quick. I'm wondering if it would be okay to include a provision in the code that said something along the lines of it's important for the operators of the vending, for the vendors to make sure that their customers are behaving in a reasonable manner and not creating any public disturbances. That's putting a lot on the vendors to enforce, and they probably wouldn't have any authority to do so.
Their customers are not splashing hot grease on people's cars.
Right, and one of the things the code does require is that the vendors need to address that, contain the grease and clean up any grease spilled, so.
Okay, Mayor, I don't think we're at a spot right now where I think this thing needs a lot more work. And I think we need to go back and have some meetings, like Mr. Walton said, with downtown business owners and see where we go from there.
Councilmember Tovar.
Thank you, Mayor. I was also going to agree with that, I think, and I appreciate everyone that's come up and made their comments. I think this topic here is very, very important, not only to our vendors, but also to our business owners or building owners. And obviously, I think it was said, is what do we want for our downtown, what our priority is. And I think there's still a lot more work to be done, and you've done a great job, and I want to commend the staff for putting this together, but I think there's still more work and more input that we can incorporate into this ordinance before we make a final decision. So I think if, again, I don't know what the timeline is. I would like to see something sooner than later, but I want to see the right thing. And if that, if we can go back out and have you meet with building owners, business owners, I think that just adds more value to what we're trying to do here. That would be my suggestion. But I want to go back to something I said earlier. We talked about permits, right? But I had mentioned if I was a business owner, shouldn't we encourage them also to apply for outdoor dining permits as well? Because that kind of helps alleviate the issue of people, setting up in front of their establishment, right? I mean, that's a way. I'm trying to find a way around things here that's going to work for folks. It's not the answer, but maybe that's a way of. Does that make sense?
You want to?
Yeah.
Mr. Corpus?
I think the one thing to remember is that the sidewalk is a public right-of-way.
Right.
So you could get multiple applications for one spot on that sidewalk, and then is it first come, first serve? Is it, I already own the business in front of me? I think it's something that would really need to be vetted.
Yeah.
But we could certainly look at that and see what the opportunity is. We encouraged outdoor dining, especially during COVID, and some businesses did that and some did not.
Right. And thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate that. And I think that it's something that we should look into, obviously, because, again, we have to find ways, again, supporting the vendors, obviously, making sure they're doing the right thing, but also making sure we're supporting the people who are help generating, folks downtown. And, it kills me to hear business owners saying, I'm investing here, and I need help here, right? So I think that we really, truly need to look at that. And if it's ways of, being creative, being proactive, not reactive, I think that, again, if that means we go back, we meet with folks and say, okay, this is what we all came up as a group. And I think I would feel more comfortable moving forward with that. So,
and we're more than happy to sit down and talk to the business owners. The only thing I would, emphasize to them is that look to modifications to what council's considering this evening with an eye to what do we need to address health, safety, welfare concerns that you are experiencing or you have observed at the moment. That would, I think, be the most to help move this forward in a productive manner.
Right. And I think my final comment, obviously, and I was out about, I think it was Friday or Saturday, and I saw our police department patrolling downtown, which I think is great. I think, again, we're being proactive with that, but I think having more security where it's, addressing the concerns of our business owners, but also concerns that maybe our vendors had, right? And I think that's something that, yes, I know what's going to be said. We don't have the funds, we don't have the manpower, but we have to find a way to make this work. And if that means investing some money into more police officers, more security, I think it's something that we need to look into as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Klein.
Yeah, I would agree with Councilmember Rocco about we're not quite there yet, and we need more discussion on this. I know I have a lot more that I've added to mine that I would love to share, but I'll share with you directly as we go through this. The challenge is because right now the desire is to get the enforcement in place. I understand that in that mechanism, but we also need to do it right so that it's long lasting and it helps everyone. It's just not one-sided in any way. And my concern is between now and then, the challenges that we have, because those are real. That's happening in downtown right now. And to the vendors, I just say, be responsible with what you're doing and be aware of what you're doing and what you're leaving behind when you leave that spot. It's tough, and to see that, it's tough on the business owners and on the property owners because they're left with stuff that isn't desirable. So I think taking pride in community is part of that, is taking an active part of that. And I would encourage those vendors to really think about that in the meantime as we're discussing this. I don't want to push this through just to push it through. We need to be responsible in what we produce, but I also hope that these vendors out there, that they would work with us too in the way they are doing their business on an ongoing basis for the time being until we get this worked out.
Okay, I don't think anybody here is trying to push anything through. I think staff is asking for direction. It's a proposed ordinance that we asked to be brought back. The longer we delay on coming up with something, the more the issues that are already happening downtown continue. So I mean, if the council just wants to leave it completely open-ended, that's certainly up to the council. But my suggestion is we start with what this proposed ordinance is. We look at the things that we've all suggested, come back with changes. I've been keeping a list of what those things are. We see if there's council support for those changes and have staff come back with something that includes those changes. And the only way to start that is to just get into it and do it, knowing that we all would like to exercise local control and say that we want our downtown to be a certain way. We can't do that with state legislation that has said we're not allowed to have a certain location. As one speaker said, Mr. Leal, we can't do that, correct? Am I wrong? We can't say, here's the space where you can have street vending. We are unable to not allow it in places where we might not otherwise want it for whatever reasons. So the best thing we can do as a council is to make sure that the appearance and the cleanliness and the egresses and ingresses are protected. So it is futile to me to just leave it back open and start over and say, let's just meet with it. That's going to take months and months and months again, and we're not going to have anything on the books until December. And meanwhile, downtown is going to be a problem. So I would like to suggest that we start with the changes or the items that we would like to see addressed, and then try this again at another meeting, new and improved, where business owners can still comment and still participate in that process. So I'm going to try to go item by item here with the things that I have heard, and then others can chime in with what they want to change or address. Okay, so can I get started with?
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
No, I understand where you're going with, and you're right. We have
What's
to
the
move
question?
forward. But again, I think we're hearing from business owners here that there's some big concerns that they have, and they want input. And
we're trying to address them.
Right. But they're the experts in this here. So by us moving forward with this, are we sort of have a meeting? Are there sort of be meetings with the business owners to give input, or just come give your input and we go from there?
They've given their input. They've input here. There'll be another council meeting with input. So, okay.
Mayor, community hearing also.
I have 3 council members on the thing. Is this wanting to speak before I start reading off the things that I'm aware of or not?
Yes.
Okay. So, Councilmember Armendariz, you're on here first.
I just want to say that consistently we've had vendors here participating. We've had restaurant owners and downtown business, building owners participate. So I feel like, and we've had a community hearing. So I think folks have had a chance. If there are things that are desperately needed that aren't on the mayor's list, then maybe we can consider it. But I feel like we will never have an exhaustive, all-encompassing ordinance, and we have to try somewhere, and we have to start sometime.
Right.
So thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Hilton.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I think that this is a start. I don't feel like I want to put everything away, but I also understand that, like with Councilmember Klein and the mayor, there's some ideas and lists of what he has. But I've seen what Mr. Klein has here. He has a lot of language, which I appreciate as an in-depth thinker. But for the mayor to try to summarize a bunch of points, I'm going to get lost really fast, and that's not going to be helpful at all. What I think would be helpful is so that way we're not exchanging emails back and forth, would be to maybe pass what is written, which is hopefully maybe the majority wants that. But at the same time, those council members or the mayor that have suggestions to additions to it, to formalize that through staff so we can all read them and the public can read them. Because I'm not comfortable with just ad-libbing what somebody thought they thought somebody else said. And like I said, Mr. Klein has a lot of information that I am interested in, but I can't process it all at once. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Marks.
What I would suggest is maybe the mayor, you go ahead and you read the statements. We could do a thumbs up, thumbs down. And then once that list is compiled, maybe staff can have a meeting with all interested parties, the business owners, vendors, whoever wants to come, go over that list and see what they might want to add to it or delete. I mean, it's up to you.
Or if we get to some kind of consensus on some of these things, we could then we can ask for us, maybe have a study session in July that would be the equivalent of that. So, okay, Councilmember Klein, you're on here again? Okay.
And Jimmy has my exhibit, so I've already shared that with him, and so he can share that with everyone.
Okay, so here, just so that we get something out of tonight that shows what a council majority, supports, I'd like to start by just going through, I'm looking at the ordinance, the proposed ordinance itself, right, the draft. That's what I'm starting with. And I'm going to go to 16B3A20, because that was one of the first things that Councilmember Tovar had mentioned, and I'm going to suggest that there be an actual distance listed in there. So whether it's 3 feet or whatever it is that staff says it should be, but it should be more than just saying sidewalk vendors shall not block access to. It should be more clear as to what the distances are that need to exist from whatever it is, entrances, whether it's capos that we're talking about, whether it's the curb because of splatter, whatever it is that addresses health, safety, the things that we can address, that the distances be actually specified so that it's clear for people when they're deciding if they're going to become a sidewalk vendor, if they want to do this. Does that have council support? Okay, I see a majority there, so that's okay. Then, under item 16B3A, this is a little one. It just happened when I emailed John. This is a typo, so I'm asking that be corrected. 16B3A2, where it says, no food sidewalk vendor may be accompanied by or in the custody or possession of an animal except a service animal. The next sentence, merchandise sidewalk vendors may have one. It's supposed to say leashed animal, not service animal. So I'm asking that be changed. Anybody have a reason not to do that? Okay, I need to see. Okay, good, got it. So that one's okay. Under insurance, I think if workers' comp is something we require, then that should be in there, because all I see, Councilmember Bracco brought that up, it just says commercial general liability insurance policy or such other policy as the office of the risk manager of the city shall require. But why isn't workers' comp mentioned if that is something we're going to make sure they have?
It's not mentioned because it's what the person in charge of that would require. So it's covered by that broader request or requirement.
You're saying it's redundant to put it in?
No, it's not redundant to put in. We can certainly do that, but the city's risk manager would require that anyway, so.
Okay, so then
It's part of 6, I think.
Part of the permitting process?
it doesn't say it, though. It doesn't
Yeah.
say workers' comp. So I'm asking, that's what I'm saying. Okay,
can-
good. So
we
if
can- we can certainly put
If we
it
have
there.
council support for that, then 16B6B6, B6 should specify workers' comp. Okay? Then, so we have majority support for that. Regarding the generators and regarding smoke. So the only thing that mentions generators is B16B3A8. And I would like to ask the council if we support that any sidewalk vendor that requests a generator or produces smoke must be a certain distance away from restaurants, brick and mortar restaurants that have outdoor dining.
And it should comply with California Air Resource Board.
Okay, and comply with California Air Resource Board. Is there majority support for that? I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so there's majority support for that. So that would be in there. So that would hopefully help alleviate some of the issues that would be around brick and mortar restaurants that are trying to have their customers enjoy outdoor seating. Okay, then for 16B3A, items 3 and 4, where Tom rattled off a lot of language. Do we want to rehear that language now or save that for a study session? I don't know what to. You went quickly. I too don't know exactly what those were. Do you want to try to? Yes.
How about we have Tom's suggestions and the ones we received in the email to go to the city attorney's office to be reviewed?
That's too much. Those, that's not for me to decide. I just think that was an awful lot of. I think I'm addressing a lot of that because many of the points in the email that we got are addressed. For
And
example,
that email wasn't subject to like public information yet.
Yeah,
the public hasn't read that email.
I wouldn't do it that way, but if that's what. Yeah, but what I'm saying is, how are we asking ourselves if we support the additions that Councilmember Klein was suggesting in 3 and 4?
I like the idea of a study session because I think it's lengthy language and it
Okay, so
merits a
we'll
discussion.
wait on those. I have also under 16B3A7 that any signage not be larger than the vending device itself. Is that council supported?
Isn't the issue
1,
with
2,
visibility though,
3,
Mayor?
4, 5.
So like we standardize the size of it because we want it to be visible too, right? Because that was an issue that a couple of
I'm
folks
sure
brought
vendors
up.
want it to be visible, but we don't want it to be larger than the device it's affixed
Right,
to.
but we also don't want it to be tiny where it can't be read, right?
As long as it's not larger than the device it's affixed to.
Okay, can we write that in a way that says that there's a standard size so that it's not too small or too big, right? Because legibility is important.
We could include a language that says so long as it's in compliance with ADA requirements.
ADA?
Okay.
That covers it.
Fine. So that will just avoid the possibility of something very large, like put behind them or something.
Well, the existing businesses have rules they have to go by, and it's by the square footage of the frontage. Be the same. They should go by the same rules.
The sign, not the sign advertising, but their permits.
Oh, I'm not talking about their permits. I'm talking about the signage.
You're talking about the signage,
Yeah.
not the permits.
No,
Okay,
I'm
I was
not talking about the
permits. Yeah, I thought
I
the
think
permits need to be
signage
legible.
should go by the same rules as a business that goes, I think it's 10% of the square footage of their frontage, and that would take care of it.
Well, the intent of this rule was to make sure that a vendor wasn't putting signs up and down the street, either those banner flag signs or A-frame signs,
Yeah.
or putting some kind of other display. It was limited to just that, the vending area.
Right, it had to be painted on their device
Right.
or affixed to their
exactly.
device. And all I was saying was there's nothing that specifies that it shouldn't be larger than the device. And
Right.
that may be silly. It may not be silly. People come up with all kinds of things. Yeah.
You could-
So I was just suggesting that it not be larger than the device that it is affixed to.
Right, that makes sense.
Okay, and so if that has majority support, okay, which I see, then, okay, then that's a go. So the only things we're leaving off, and what about a reporting mechanism? Do we have something in this ordinance, or should we have something in this ordinance that addresses how people report? Like one of the public speakers said, that there should be a way to upload photos or to send, an easy way, kind of like what we do for fireworks, or we try to do for fireworks, that makes it so that those who are out there at the time and someone is clearly violating what they're doing, that we can address that.
Madam Mayor, Mayor City Council, I think right now it would be helpful to staff that you give us direction that you want a reporting structure.
Okay.
Let us see what we think works
Perfect.
best and then bring that back to you at the study
Do we
session.
have council support for a reporting structure?
Yes.
One, two,
And
okay, good.
The city of Modesto has an excellent one that they use for vendors and for garbage.
Okay,
so we
thank
can look
you.
at that one.
Thank you. Okay, so then that really addresses everything that I heard, except for the specifics of what Councilmember Klein was adding. So if that's, yes, Councilmember Bracco?
I would like to hear from staff when they come back, clear plan of how they plan to implement this, if they're going to enforce it or not. If we need to approve overtime, to have inspectors out there at night, or how can we handle it?
Right. And am I correct that we can't have hours on this? We can't,
No, it says we can prohibit hours.
well,
You could, but the state law says that you can't impose hours that are more restrictive than hours that
Than
are
the
imposed
businesses,
on
exactly.
business. So unless you want to impose hours on other businesses,
Right.
there's nothing to follow.
right. And it's also important for the public to realize that it doesn't even begin to address the food trucks.
Correct.
This is not food trucks. That's the next thing. So,
Good distinction.
okay, well, I for one, am very glad to see us addressing this now. I think the problem is out there, and we do need to get a handle on this. So are we in agreement to set a study session in July? Is everybody willing to meet in July so that we can nip this come August? Good? Yes.
You're brave.
I'm not going to repeat back verbatim what was just directed, but I want to lay out the process so staff is very clear about what is expected. I will work with council the next day or two to schedule a study session in which we will take the direction we received tonight. We will incorporate it into the original ordinance that we brought this evening, and we'll go through it a second time at that study session that will be open to the public. Council won't have to make any decisions at that night, but the hope from staff is that we get enough direction, enough clarity, we can return in August with a first reading of the ordinance, which would then require a second reading of the ordinance. If that is correct by council, that's the plan that we'll implement.
Correct by me.
Jimmy, would that be, because again, I think, I'm thinking that we want to sort of fast track this, so would that first reading come back the first meeting in August and the second the end of August?
It could, depending on the feedback we get at that study session.
Okay.
If a lot of the adjustments are quite minor or ministerial, of course, but if they have a lot of legal analysis or they take us into another direction, we can let you know then.
Sounds good. Thank you.
One question, comment. Since this is a public hearing and we've published a notice in the paper, does the council need to continue us to a date specific so we don't have to republish the notice?
Yes, you could. This was set as a public hearing. 10-day notice public hearing?
Yes.
So then you would need to continue it to a date certain, or you would have to re-notice in the paper.
So do we want to say?
I thought I turned it on. I turned it off. So yes, you would have to continue it to a date certain.
I would suggest continuing to the first meeting in August, and if we're not ready, we can at least agendize it and continue it again.
Yes.
Okay, so August 7th.
Thank you.
The study session will be in July.
Right.
Or an hour before the meeting.
Well, that's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea.
But then how would staff incorporate anything that comes out of the study session into the?
They could type fast.
No, no. Guys, I think we're agreeing to a July study session, so if you guys are planning vacations, I just finished mine, so I'm good. I'm good. Okay. All right. Thank you, John.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you, everybody who
You're
came
very
and took the
welcome.
time.
Thank you.
Okay. So continue to a study session and then to August 7th. All right. That brings us now on our agenda to item 10, unfinished business, annual appointments to city boards, commissions, and committees with seats vacant or expired as of June 19th, 2023. Ty?
Yes, Madam Mayor, just a quick report here. At the last City Council regular meeting, you interviewed 2 applications, although we did receive 4. The first, the one applicant that you did interview was Terrence Fugazi, followed by Stephanie Okada McCabe. So that just concludes my report.
Okay. Okay, so council, tonight we're voting, and we've got we had applicants for the unexpired 6 months basically left on the Planning Commission seat, and then we also had one applicant for Parks and Rec seat and for Personnel Commission seat. So I'm going to go down. Did I lose council members?
Yeah, there.
Okay, I guess I need to wait. I was going to start the voting. Did Councilmember Bracco just walk out? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Okay, so as I was saying, when I call your name, I'm just going to go down the row. If you could please let me know who your vote is for the unexpired Planning Commission, the rest of the Planning Commission term that will expire December 31 of 2023. Okay? Okay?
Wait, the unexpired or the one that will expire? Will expire.
The one that is, well, it's unexpired because it's going to expire 12/31 of 2023.
Not the full. Not the full.
It was an unexpected vacancy.
There's only one seat that we're
Planning Commission. Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
and it expires December 31 of 2023.
Okay.
Okay, and there are 4 applicants. Okay, so Councilmember Bracco, you said Terrence Fugazi. Councilmember Armendariz.
Danny Molina.
Okay, Councilmember Marks.
Terrence.
Councilmember Hilton.
Not voting.
Not voting. Okay, Councilmember Klein.
Terrence Fugazi.
Councilmember Tovar.
Terrence.
Okay, that's 4 for Terrence, so he's already got a majority. So Terrence, you're on the Planning Commission, and that makes you off of the OGO and Parks and Rec. Okay, moving on, I have to ask, I don't know if anybody wants to vote or not, but I'm asking I'm going to go down the line again, if you wish to cast a vote for the Parks and Rec Commission for Courtney Hodge. Dion, Councilmember Bracco?
Yes.
You want to vote for her?
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Armendariz? You don't have to vote.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Marks?
No.
Councilmember Hilton?
Not voting.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Councilmember Tovar?
Yes.
And I am a no. There was no interview, but that got 4 votes. So Courtney Hodge gets Parks and Rec Commission, right? Okay. And I'm sorry, I have to ask, what does not voting mean?
It's the same thing that was done to Jan Bernstein. Yeah.
What?
It's the same thing that was done to Jan Bernstein. People didn't vote for anyone, right, when there was a viable candidate.
Yeah, there could be a situation like...
No, not voting for anyone, I understand. I thought you were not voting. You're saying you're not voting for anyone. That's what, sorry. Your opinion is to not put a person, to not put a candidate in that seat. Okay. What about for Personnel Commission? Councilmember Bracco.
I'm not voting.
Okay, Councilmember Armendariz.
We only had one application for that, right?
It's the same person
It's the
who
same
you just
person?
put on Parks and
Yeah,
Rec.
so no.
Okay, Councilmember Marks.
No.
Councilmember Hilton.
Not voting.
Councilmember Klein.
No.
Councilmember Tovar.
No.
Okay, and I'm no. So that means we've got, so Terrence Fugazi is on the Planning Commission through December 31, 2023. Courtney Hodge is on the Parks and Rec Commission through December 31, 2023. Correct? Okay, we are done with that agenda item. All right, item 11.1, council direction concerning the city's ongoing membership in the Cities Association of Santa Clara County. Jimmy, are you going to give this report?
I will do that. Madam Mayor, members of City Council, this is just a review of council direction concerning membership in the Cities Association of Santa Clara County. Gilroy has been a member of this association for numerous years, since it was established in 1990. I'll read you a couple of quick things about this, the city's association. It was started in 1990 as a representative of the 15 cities of Santa Clara County, and they have been meeting monthly and collaborating on issues that affect each of us, striving to create a unified voice within the county. Over the last year or two, there have been situations where the association's policy or direction have been in contrast to that of the City Council of Gilroy. And the most visible one was that in an employment case, which 14 out of 15 cities voted to pay, and the City of Gilroy voted not to. That was for various reasons of the council, and one that has required staff to ensure that the direction we're going with this association is one that is still the desire of council. Some other issues have arisen from this group in that their budget was recently adopted. In 2022, their budget was $150,000. It has almost doubled to $281,000 just in the last year. And Gilroy's contribution has risen 35% from $10,800 to $14,600 as well. So it is a significantly growing cost. Another issue at hand is that, and I'm sorry I didn't mention this, that when that settlement was made on behalf of the 14 out of 15 cities, it was requested by the city managers group that this cities association put in policies and procedures that would help eliminate the situation that created the lawsuit in the first place. And to date, no action has been taken by them. So my opinion is we still are liable for the actions of others that we may not be aware of, and may be asked again to participate in a settlement in which we may feel there is no liability on the part of the Gilroy community. Another instance is the Cities Association has discussed starting a joint powers authority, and that was something that was extremely alarming to the city managers group, and that the authority and those proposing that they create this authority wanted to have the ability to issue debt and purchase assets and properties, which is not real typical of these types of associations, and again may be one where Gilroy in South County is not wanting to participate in those type of activities and not take on that kind of liability. I will say over the years, if you've been involved, there has been a lot of work by that group addressing many policies and issues in our communities, including racial justice, public safety reform, hate crimes, Santa Cruz, Santa Clara airport situations, and then regional housing needs allocation. Really the question from staff is, does council want to continue working through that group, or does the Gilroy want to have an independent voice on issues that direct maybe Gilroy differently? We as staff are not making a recommendation either way, because this is an organization of elected officials. It is not staff members that attend or that participate, so we it being a politically based organization of elected officials is one that we as staff don't feel comfortable making a recommendation either way. Council has a couple of choices here. They can discuss this matter. They can decide not to discuss this matter at all and make no action. And if that's the case, we will submit our membership fees and continue on with our membership as we have in the past. But I felt it was important to at least give you the opportunity, if you had thoughts on our membership, to express them. And if you do not, we will continue on the path that we have chosen over several years. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay.
question.
Thank you, Jimmy. Yes, was that Councilmember Ronderos?
Yeah. So the cities association, what kind of organization? Is it a nonprofit? Is it a C4? What kind of organization is it?
I don't
Because
think
it's not an official, it's quasi-governmental, right?
It is. It does
private.
operate under the Brown Act because
Yeah.
of the amount of elected officials, but I do not believe that it is a 501c3. To be honest with you, that as part of the issues with forming the Joint Powers Authority was to give it some kind of status.
Yeah.
And so I don't have an answer for your question.
That's a good answer then, if you don't have the answer.
So speaking as the one who's been the representative to that organization for the last, 3 or 4 years, it was meant, it was created a long, long time ago, and I know back in the days of some of our prior mayors, I'm going back more than 10 years, it was very effective because it was a means of all the mayors. It was meant to be for the mayors or vice mayors to represent each of the 15 cities for matters that affect all cities, to have a voice for all cities in whatever the subject matter is. It's been laden with some issues lately, its own staff related, and I, for one, am not sure how effective I would say that it is. My question to Jimmy before this meeting was, if we ever wanted to rejoin, what would that mean? And the answer was, you simply start paying the dues again. So we're not doing anything, if we do anything, we're not doing anything permanent. We certainly could choose to re-enter, but as the person who's been representing Gilroy on that, I certainly have not felt, in the last couple of years at least, that it's been something very worthwhile of my time.
Mayor, do you feel like some of the issues that are brought there there's other structures where the city is represented, or we represent ourselves as an independent city? Like, are there issues there that can only be addressed there?
No, it's not that they can only be addressed there. It's just that's the only existing mechanism for the cities of Santa Clara County to unite in any for or against or in support of any particular issue. It's not unlike state organizations that try to get, or the cities association that works for cities throughout the state. This is like that, but just for Santa Clara County.
Specific to our county.
Just for Santa Clara County. And there have been times when that's been useful for things just for the county. But the dues are getting high, and the exposure is what it does scare me. The exposure, the potential exposure.
Couldn't we just change that language, the exposure language, in the charter or whatever governing document it has? Can't we just lobby to change that instead of?
I think we would need the adoption through the other 14 cities to make any amendments to the rules. And I don't know what their appetite would be for letting one city out of that exposure. And that was part of what we were trying to address with the changes in bringing in a new executive director is we don't even know what the definition of their position is. Are they a contractor? Are they an employee? So without a status, we don't know what to adjust.
Mayor, I appreciate your feedback on that, and just for me, hearing that and knowing sort of the fees, I would hold off on sort of, joining until we feel it's the right time. Again, there's no penalty for us not paying our dues, and we can always jump back in anytime we want to. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Have you heard, Mayor? Can I ask you?
Yeah.
Have you heard from other members, other cities, other mayors, these same questions or the same concerns?
Not to the level of wanting to pull out and not pay their dues. At least to my knowledge, all of the other cities are still staying in. So do you know, Jimmy, from other city managers? Yeah. I don't think so. I don't think others are. We would be alone. We were the only ones who didn't pay into that claim either.
But we weren't penalized or anything for.
You can't be penalized. It's not about being penalized. It's about, it's about your.
No, but for removing ourselves from that lawsuit, were we penalized, or is there anything they could do to us about it?
No.
We can pick and choose.
No, they could have pushed the issue that we had to, but I think the amount that we were required to pay, it was actually absorbed by the insurance company, which we do pay into kind of in some ways.
It's $8,000, but this is not.
For our membership
Yeah, we're not talking big. even their membership, it's not about the dollar amount. It's just about, for me, it's more about the exposure, being unclear as to how this organization is going forward, how it's structured and organized, and what are they doing, because I don't have the time to pay that close attention to it. I can't. And, yeah. So what does this council want to do?
I gave this recommendation or suggestions. I said hold on.
Meaning
off?
back off. Back off.
What do you mean?
Not pay the dues. Not
So,
pay the dues.
remove ourselves?
Which would make us no longer members until we pay our dues.
I agree with that.
Sound good?
I just, yeah.
Did you need a motion?
I don't think so. Do we need a motion? Oh,
Just need a council direction.
Ty says motion to authorize.
Just need you to tell me if you want me to pay the fees or not.
Oh, no, that's different. Council, I don't need a motion.
Then may direct staff.
Oh, but I do need public comment. I do have to
Yes,
ask
you
for
do,
public
Madam
comment.
Yes, you do.
No public comments, Madam.
Okay, thanks. No public comment. Okay, well, we have council consensus to no longer participate in cities association for the time being. I know, it's a hard one, because it's, yeah. Okay, 11.2.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a very simple one.
It's what?
Simple staff report here.
Oh, for the next one? Hey,
Yes.
but before we move on to that, how do we notify them? Or do we? What do I do?
As
Well, because I mean, I'm the one assigned right now, so
as
what do-
the representative to the committee, I'll draft a letter for you to sign on behalf of the city.
Okay.
Conveying the council's position.
Thank you.
That we are temporarily going to suspend our involvement.
Okay, thank you. All right, 11.2, selection of voting delegate for the League of California Cities 2023 Annual Conference. Ty?
Yes, so it's a quick staff report here. It's just that the annual conference will be at the Sacramento this September from 20th to the 22nd. And basically, the council needs to select a designated voting delegate member and up to 2 alternate voting delegates to vote on several of the resolutions that will be coming forth in the packet for the League of California Cities annual conference.
Okay, can you tell us who is going to the conference?
So currently, as of today, we
Well,
have...
this is when we're voting, so
Yes,
yeah.
You, Mayor Blankley.
Mhm.
We have Councilmember Tovar, and we also have Councilmember Marks and Councilmember Almaderes.
Oh, okay. So 4 people going right now. Okay, so we need to appoint a voting delegate and an alternate,
Correct.
okay?
And last year, it was Councilmember
Councilmember
Tovar
Tovar,
as the designated.
and I was the alternate.
And the alternate was you.
Right. And I would like to propose the same this year, if that's okay with everybody?
That's fine. I would
Okay.
like to ask something, though, too.
Go ahead.
How far ahead of time do you get the agenda?
A week, 2 weeks? Oh, maybe you do. I don't remember.
There's a current itinerary, but there's no actual
Right.
physical.
The actual schedule, but you get like a schedule of what classes are going to be, what things
There's
you can
actually an
attend?
itinerary right now on the website.
Oh, that's already out?
It is already on the website.
Oh.
Does it include what items are going to be voted on?
That will come in shortly.
Yeah, and that's, currently it's not.
There's not ready
Yeah,
available at
just
this
because
time.
I think per our discussion last year, trying to know ahead of time for the council to take a stance, right? So regardless of who's voting, that it's in, concurrence with what we decide as a council. So we don't have renegade voters out there.
So if we get it in time, you'll bring it before the council, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I do recall that same conversation last year. That
Okay. Yeah.
The issue we have sometimes is we get it so late.
I know.
So as soon as we get it, we'll try to
Thank
get it
you.
to council.
Okay. Whoops, was there supposed to be public comment on this?
It's on the agenda.
Public
Yes,
comment, okay.
And if I remember correctly, there is no
Is there
comment on it.
public comment?
No.
Okay, no public comment. Okay. Then that brings us to 11.3, which is consent of the appointment of Carl Biarchi as interim Public Works Director, effective July 11th, 2023, and adoption of a resolution of the City Council of the City of Gilroy approving the appointment and employment agreement. Leanne.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. This item is on the Council's agenda because there are CalPERS requirements associated with an interim appointment of somebody to a department head position who is a CalPERS retired annuitant. We are asking to appoint Carl Biarchi to the position of Interim Public Works Director due to the recent resignation of our Public Works Director. And to ensure the continuity of management in the Public Works Department during this critical time, we recommend that the Council consent to the appointment of Carl Biarchi as our Interim Public Works Director effective tomorrow, July 11th, 2023, and approve the resolution consenting the appointment and authorizing the City Administrator to execute the employment agreement. Again, this is due to the vacancy in this position. We've already taken steps to commence the recruitment process for the Public Works Director. And so it's not uncommon to hire an interim Public Works Director while the recruitment is being conducted. Carl Biarchi is familiar to us. He has worked here before. He is available to fill the position and is willing to do so. He has extensive experience in public works, and he is ready to hit the ground running. California Government Code Section 21221H allows an agency to hire a retired annuitant to serve in an interim position when there is an immediate need for expertise and specialized skills, and the recruitment is underway for the position. The staff report contains the work that will be performed. He's limited to 960 hours in a fiscal year for this assignment, so we have to move forward with diligence and completing the recruitment process due to that hours limitation. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, council members, any questions?
Yeah, and have we already
Armendariz?
started recruiting or
We have requested proposals from search firms to assist us with a various number of recruitments. As you know, Council approved the new position of Utilities Director, and so that job description is under development right now, hopefully going to the Personnel Commission at their next meeting. That also is necessitating updates to the Public Works Director job description. So those will also be going forward to the Personnel Commission at the end of this month. And we also have a vacant city engineer position. So what we are envisioning is once Personnel Commission approves those two job descriptions, that we will be able to move forward with the recruitment of all three of those positions with the assistance of a search firm. And we're getting those proposals now so that we can move quickly once those job descriptions are in place.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Biarchi is also our project manager for the Sharks project too,
correct. Correct.
So he'll just balance that.
Yeah, there's not too much workload associated with that right now, so he has the capacity to assist with the public works function, generally.
Okay, do we have any public comments?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, no public comments. So looking for a motion. Okay, moved by Councilmember Bracco and seconded by Councilmember Klein to consent to the appointment of Carl Biarchi.
And adopting the resolution.
And adopting the resolution. Roll call vote, right? Okay.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to get it set up.
Sure.
I'll just do it this time. Can I get the motion?
The motion was made by...
Yes, by Councilmember Bracco.
Mm-hmm.
And seconded
By Councilmember Klein.
Thank you. Councilmember Armendariz?
Yes.
Councilmember Bracco? Yes. Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Councilmember Hilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marks?
Yes.
Councilmember Tovar? Yes. And Mayor Blankley?
Yes. All right, that passed unanimously. Okay, city administrators reports.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have just two quick reports. One, I wanted to give council and the public a report on the 4th of July. We had 12 additional officers on the beat that night. It was very busy. The officers received 382 calls for service that evening, of which 112 were fireworks related. We did issue 3 criminal citations for fireworks violations, and 30 administrative citations were issued for fireworks violations. So it was very much a busy night. We used unmarked and marked police vehicles, drones to identify fireworks safety violations, and confiscated numerous amounts of illegal fireworks. But I think, as was mentioned earlier, it's quite a job to have our fireworks show be a little bit better than the one that the public puts on. So we continue our enforcement, and we will see how effective we are each year. We make adjustments and see how we do through the administrative process. But I'll give you a report on that later down the road.
Jimmy, can you let the public know what the sale of safe and sane fireworks pays for? Okay.
Yes, actual enforcement of the illegal fireworks is paid for by mitigation fees paid by the vendors who have the stands. They operate those. It's typically a nonprofit or such that has a permit, and part of their, whenever they sell a firework, there's a fee on top of it that's looped in, and we receive that to help enforcement.
Generally covers the cost of the additional enforcement, does
Yes.
it not? It's not just a little piece of it. It's
It does-
how.
That's the plan, is that it funds that
Exactly.
enforcement for the
It
evening.
funds the enforcement for that, right, the additional enforcement that. Okay, thank you.
And the second piece of my report is just a really special thing that I was able to participate in with the mayor as we both went to our sister city of Angra, which is in Chaucera Island in the Azores. It was not quite what I expected. They don't sleep at all there. I'm still tired. But basically, we went and we learned a lot about a country that has a lot of immigrants here, and learned about how that occurred and why that occurred over the course of the 1950s and such. So and it wasn't all fun. There was a lot of history and a lot of exchange of ideas and learning about culture and learning about our friends, across the ocean. But some of the things that really jumped out at me is similarities we see in some of the communities. They had a very large Air Force base there up until the 90s, tens of thousands of servicemen, servicewomen there, and now they're down to just a few hundred. So their economy has had to change from one relying on military spending to tourism. And so that is something that they've had to embrace, but that's not in like Monterey or some of these other places that aren't too far from us. Their biggest challenge right now, and we face that as two, but in a different way, is their workforce. In that we don't have enough people to do a lot of our jobs. Their kids are leaving. They're going to school off the island and they never come back. So everybody's getting older and the kids don't come back. And having a tourism-based economy is a challenge for them to fill those jobs. So that was some things that I just didn't expect on the trip. The last thing is they had a 10-day festival. I lasted 5 days. There's no way anybody can do 10 days of that festival.
We're going to need pictures.
No pictures, no evidence of any activities.
If it's not, it didn't happen.
It's the first time I've ever seen something scheduled for 4 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
They schedule things for 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it's true.
And then I think the mayor and I both agree they have an unhealthy obsession with bulls.
Yes. And they have more cows than people on the island.
So I would like to thank former Mayor Al Pinheiro, who has the energy of a 3-year-old. He was up for everything, did everything, and was a great host, and we learned a lot from him. I would love to do this in another city, but like the mayor stated, it really is volunteer-driven, and Al is a super volunteer, and the community really embraced us and made us feel very welcome. So really great experience, and would love to do it again, but maybe not during the festival because I'm still very tired. That concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Jolie, do you have anything you were wanting to say?
No report.
Okay. Then with that, we adjourn.